Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going from garage to greatness, because this is the story of how Steve Jobs built Apple in his parents' garage. In 1976, Steve Jobs was working as an electronics technician for Atari. He earned $20,000 a year, and he would wake up at 4 a.m. to go to work, and then he'd work a second job at a local pizza parlor. At the end of every week, he would take the bus home to his parents' house, where he shared a room with his younger brother and sister. His bed was a sleeping bag, and he saved everything he could. And when they finally cleared it out, Steve Jobs' jaw dropped. It was huge. It looked like a cathedral. He moved to a bigger space nearby and hired their first employees. They still kept in touch with their roots. In fact, whenever Apple held company meetings, they would bring food over to the old garage and reminisce about the good old days. Meanwhile, their computers were becoming more popular by the day, but the competition was catching up. It gave users more memory and more space for storage, and it could even display colorful graphics. As the company grew, Steve Jobs became more and more difficult to work with. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The moment he took the job, he turned on his former friends. In 1985, he visited Xerox PARC and saw their new operating system. It was called the Macintosh Extended Environment, or the MICE. He tried to salvage his career by starting a new multimedia company, but that failed. He had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 7 years prior, and his condition worsened. Steve Jobs died in 2011, but his legacy lives on. Under Tim Cook's leadership, Apple has become the largest company in the world. They continue to release groundbreaking products, and they've donated hundreds of millions of dollars to charity. It's amazing what Steve Jobs accomplished. He started his business in his mom's garage and turned it into a worldwide phenomenon. So he went back to Apple in 1997 and became friends with Woz again. He spent the next 3 years fixing Apple's flaws, but it wasn't enough. In 2000, Apple's stock fell below $10. The company was dying. Tim Cook joined Apple in 1998, first as a major customer, then as a board member, and eventually as CEO. He paid Steve a visit and told him how much he admired him, wanted to work for him. But Steve Jobs was tired and burnt out. He'd already given up on his dreams once. He wasn't about to try it again. "Tim, I'm not worthy," he told Cook. "The best thing you can do for me is to take over." And that's exactly what he did. He absolutely loved it. But unfortunately, Xerox wasn't doing anything with it. So Steve Jobs decided to steal it. Just kidding. He borrowed the idea and created his own version called the Common User Access, or CUA. He wanted to make Apple's new operating system even better. So he assembled a team of the smartest engineers and programmers he could find. Together they worked day and night, and a year later they unveiled it to the world. It was called the Newton Message Pad. It looked like a tablet, and it ran on a battery. Users could write messages and sketches directly onto the screen and store them in their very own electronic notebook. Apple believed this device was the future, and they spent billions of dollars on research and development. But sadly, sales were dismal. Nobody wanted a tablet when they could just use a computer. He completely revamped the management team and pushed everyone out who he didn't trust. And unfortunately, that included Woz. "I felt betrayed," says Woz. "We started the company together, and he was supposed to be my best friend." To make matters worse, Steve spent most of his time working on new projects, and he left the Macintosh almost completely alone. Sales started slowing down, and the competition caught up. He would hold meetings that lasted for hours. He expected perfection from his employees, and he wasn't afraid to speak his mind. But things came to a head when he met with John Sculley, the CEO of Pepsi. "You've created a generation of personal computers, but you haven't created a generation of users," Sculley told him. "We can change that," replied Steve. "Oh, I'm sure you can," said Sculley, "but I want you running Apple." And just like that, Steve was hired away from Apple and made CEO of the entire company. But Apple didn't stop there. The next year they introduced the Macintosh, which was unlike anything the world had ever seen before. Not only was it a supercomputer, but it also came with a mouse. It even displayed pictures in color. Steve Jobs was so proud of the Macintosh that he personally led the marketing campaign. "It's so easy, even a child can use it," he famously said. And the ad campaign was a huge success. Everyone wanted a Mac. Even though it cost twice as much as the PC, Customers didn't care. Apple sold out within hours. They couldn't make Macs fast enough. So in order to stay ahead, Apple needed to make a really big move. That's when it hit him. This is where I'm going to build my empire. Steve's mom even helped him put up a sign that read, Matrix Electronics, where innovation is born. Business was good. Their first computer sold for $400, and their profits started rolling in. But soon the government came knocking. See, all of their profits were being poured back into the business. They didn't pay themselves a salary, so they weren't making any money. Plus, Steve was spending way too much time in the garage and not enough time at his day job. So eventually he got fired. But that didn't bother him, because now he could work on his business full-time. All he had to do was save up $1,800, and then he would have enough money to start his own business. One day, Steve met up with his old friend from college, Steve Wozniak, who worked at Atari just like him. On the first day of trading, their stock went up by 53%, and within 2 hours, their value increased by $1 million. It's unbelievable. He thought they'd be better off working at a bigger, more established company. But Steve Jobs wasn't having it. He wanted his company back. So he and Woz spent the next year developing products that would blow people away. Steve Jobs was a self-made millionaire before he even turned 25, and right after the stock market closed. He and his partners celebrated by driving to the beach in a beat-up Volkswagen bus, the same bus that Steve hitchhiked across the country in all those years ago. They parked the bus, got out, and stared at the ocean. It was quiet. No one spoke for a while. They were all thinking the same thing. It's the life we dreamed of. Steve showed off a new computer that he bought, and it was a big hit. But after playing around with it, wasn't too impressed. But he didn't know what to do with it. Then he turned to his buddy, Steve Jobs, who was always so full of ideas. You need to sell this thing to me, was told Steve. And that's when it hit Steve. There was a market for these computers, but there was no one selling them. So he proposed a partnership to Woz. I'll help you build these computers, and you'll help me sell them. What do you say? Asked Steve. Sounds like a deal, replied Woz. And together they formed a company called Matrix Electronics. I can build something better than this, he said. So without hesitation, he did exactly that. You see, both of their moms kept their garages immaculate. They used them for parties and other social events, and they weren't about to let their sons turn them into some kind of junkyard. So they kept their business a secret. Instead of calling it a computer company, they pretended it was a magazine subscription business. Whenever their mothers entered the garage, they would have to hide under the cars. This went on for a few months until one day their mother walked in on them while they were building a computer. Needless to say, she was not pleased. But after she realized her boys were serious about this business, she agreed to let them use the garage, under one condition, that they would clean it out first. So that's exactly what they did. Over the next few weeks, Woz built a computer from scratch, and he was proud of what he made. But they knew their parents would unlet them use their garages if they found out what they were up to. It was messy. Every corner was covered in junk. As the years passed, the garage became too small for their operations. In 1980, Apple Computer Incorporated was formed, and the company went public. But not everyone was happy. One of the founders, Mike Markula, left the company shortly after the IPO, and he took a lot of Apple's early employees with him. The following year, Apple introduced the Apple II Plus, which sold even better than the original Apple II. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. This was great news for Apple, because it meant that Steve Jobs would be leading the company, and he had a ton of new ideas. But Steve Jobs didn't care. He had a new passion. In 1996, Steve Jobs was asked to leave Apple. Steve Jobs stayed on as a consultant and mentor, but his health started to decline. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys next time.